Here down under, in the great land of Australia, Emperor Albanese has declared social media will be banned for those of us who happen to be under the age of 16. And the response to this policy has not really been as much backlash or pushback as I would have thought. At least from what I've seen, a lot of people's thoughts around this social media ban has mainly been curiosity and confusion, wanting to know how is it actually going to work? Because I think a lot of people, kind of including myself, think that banning social media for under 16s is not actually a terrible idea. And so right at the top, I do want to tell you my opinion with regards to this ban. I think, personally, that banning under 16s from using social media is probably a good thing. Of course, with the asterisk that it does heavily depend on the way they effectuate these laws. But my reasoning for sort of agreeing with the idea of banning under 16s from social media is because I grew up in the 2010s. That's when I had my teen years. And for those who are living under a rock or I guess weren't born yet, social media absolutely exploded during the 2010s, and it was in a lot of ways like the wild, wild west. Moderation today in 2025 is not perfect on really any platform, but back in the 2010s, moderation was just almost non-existent. I was a teenager in that time on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and I saw things like ISIS beheading videos, and I saw classmates of mine, young teenage girls, have their nudes posted on Facebook for the whole year group to see. I knew many young teenage girls and frankly boys that really got sucked into like the dark side of Tumblr, where they were romanticizing things like self-harm and suicidal ideation. I saw content around like eating disorders and all this stuff, and a lot of the teenage girls that were in my year group and at my school, they consumed a lot of that stuff, and it was very harmful. And so I feel like I've seen the direct negative effects that social media can have, particularly on that age range of 13 to 15. A lot of people from that era kind of consider what we went through to be like, you know, we were guinea pigs for these big tech giants. They were able to just absolutely profit like gangbusters and put out this product that put a lot of us at risk and susceptible to like dangerous content online. And so that side of things, like the actual harm that this algorithmically driven platform with moderation that is always going to have things slip through, that is where I'm coming from when it comes to my support of the idea of banning under 16s from social media. But that doesn't mean I'm fully in support of this law as it will be enacted. And that's what I kind of want to talk about in this video. Because the big question in my mind about this banning of social media is how are they going to implement it? What is the mechanism that they're going to use to make sure that under 16s don't go on social media? Because you may have heard of other countries sort of trial running this whole social media ban idea, and from what we can tell, it seems to be going pretty fucking poorly for those countries. I mean, let's look at the UK. This is the government website in the UK explaining the Keeping Children Safe Online Safety Act. And they're framing it all around this ability to keep children safe, which on paper is not a terrible idea, but the UK's implementation of this kind of a policy literally leads to, as they've written down here, platforms are required to use secure methods like facial scans, photo ID, and credit card checks to verify the age of their users. Now, of course, that's just an absolute privacy nightmare. Like, nobody wants to have to give their government ID when you want to go and look at something like pornography. And so based on the way that the UK has implemented this law by requiring ID checks whenever you want to go on any website that is like over 18, people have been understandably worried about whether or not here in Australia we will implement that kind of authoritarian overreach of privacy when implementing this law. But personally, I'm not so sure that I can say with confidence that our government would go down that route, and I'll tell you why. So here we have an email. This is from Tracy Roberts, a federal member of parliament. And because she represents me, she sends me emails and tells me about laws that are about to come out. Yeah, I have a direct line to the government, that's right. And so I thought it would be useful to read through at least what is the government's line about this law. What do they say will be the way that it's enacted? Dear Daniel, the Australian government is taking world-leading action to reduce online harms experienced by young Australians by introducing a minimum age to access social media. So for those unaware, this law is coming in on the 10th of December. Their justification is that delaying access to social media accounts until the age of 16 will protect young Australians at a critical stage of their development, giving them 3 more years to build real-world connections and online resilience. So on paper, I'm like perfectly okay with that, right? My skepticism obviously comes in when, you know, like if you look at the UK and they're requiring of IDs to go on 18 plus websites, what's so messed up about that from my perspective is like, why should we punish adults and adult users of the internet in an attempt to protect young users of the internet? If we want to protect young people on the internet, we don't have to simultaneously punish and make worse the experience for adults who are using the internet, right? This change will reduce access for young people to some of the harmful aspects of social media, such as algorithms that recommend content, okay, infinite scrolling, all right, and other features designed to keep users continuously engaged. The law is intended to capture social media platforms like TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, X, Facebook, and YouTube. So that's another aspect to this law that I think is better than places like the UK, is that it's actually quite narrow. It does specifically target social media platforms that use algorithms to present like a timeline or a feed. And from what I can understand, it actually says here, it won't stop young people from staying in touch with friends online, playing games, learning new things, and being entertained. In fact, they will still be able to access messaging apps, online gaming, professional networking, and development services, and services that are primarily for the purposes of education and health support. That's a good point, because I had heard that in the UK, in their attempt to protect children online, websites that were like teaching sexual education and teaching kids about things like puberty and safe sex, those were getting banned for under 16s. And to me, that is pretty counterintuitive, because those resources do actually protect kids. And so if we're then banning those resources under this guise of like protecting kids, then that's a bad implementation of the law. And so I hope that this law, based on the wording that they've provided, is not going to do that. I hope that it's not going to crack down on any kind of health resources, education resources. I think the fact they still have access to like messaging apps, I meant to go small there, you know, messaging apps, online gaming, these things where I think kids can potentially have positive communities online. I think it's good that we're not just completely taking that away. And I will concede that like I understand online spaces can be good for young people if they are positive online spaces with, you know, a certain amount of safeguards and good people involved in those spaces. And that is honestly where I get the most squishy about whether or not to support this law, is that I have seen young people say that they don't want their access to internet cut off so stringently, and that it's actually incredibly infantilizing to sort of treat them like babies who can't handle any aspects of the internet. Now, I don't think this law will necessarily do that, but I can understand why a 13 to 15-year-old might feel that way. And look, to be clear, I think if they do implement this law in the same way that the UK has implemented their internet ban law, then I'll be against that, right? I think that's a terrible idea. I think they should absolutely not require any kinds of ID or like privacy violating stuff to be provided from adults. I think if they do that, I personally will speak up about it and protest it, and I hope the rest of the country does too. Because I should not have to put my privacy at risk and put out my information onto all these different websites that shouldn't have a right to it just because we want to keep kids safe. Like, that is so counterintuitive to me. And so yeah, I don't want to see what's happening in the UK happen here. Now you might be asking, okay, but if they're not going to ask for ID, how do they enforce the law, right? Like who do they punish? Who is liable to maintain this standard? Well, from what I can tell by looking around, it's the platforms themselves that will be at risk of facing fines and punishment for allowing an under 16 to create an account. It won't actually be the 16-year-old themselves or the 15-year-old or their family. They won't be the ones who are punished or targeted in terms of enforcing this law. I would, however, be remiss if I didn't present some of the counters to this argument and some people who are actually against the social media ban. So I'll start with this guy, Leo Puglisi. He is the host of 6 News Australia. Now, for anyone unaware, 6 News is actually quite a popular news brand in Australia, and Leo created it, I think, at the age of like 14 or 15. He's a very like entrepreneurial young man, and I think he's a good reporter. You know, he's interested in putting the news out, and him and his mates have all gotten together, and I think what they do is really good, and I think it's a good project that they're engaged in. And so I think it's a fair criticism of the ban to say that if these kids weren't able to access social media media under 16, they wouldn't have been able to build what they have built. And so this is Leo Puglisi speaking to Parliament, I believe, and explaining why he opposes the social media ban. Let's take a listen.
When you're connecting with young people, which I assume are a big chunk of your audience, under 16s, how much of that connection with the audience is currently happening on social media?
Yeah, well, pretty much all of it. I mean, maybe the 1 or 2 times a year I'll get recognised in the street, but people are commenting on social media all the time, and we see other young people talking about it. And you see it in the replies to just about every time we're reporting on the social media ban. A 15-year-old who has Instagram would be talking about it. I know that the people in that age group, even at my school, are talking about it in person because it's a real issue. And it's something that young people do deeply care about. So they're always having those discussions on social media. It's where young people are getting their news, not just from 6 News, it's where they're getting informed. And I think young people do have the right to be informed. We're having, serious conversations in this country and around the world about lowering the voting age to 16, but we're saying that a 15-year-old can't access information on social media. I just don't think that adds up.
Okay, Leo, I think that is a very fair take. And from my understanding, a lot of the kids who are 14 and 15, they're capable of having opinions and chiming into this conversation. I think it's fair that they want to be able to continue to be informed and continue to be able to communicate with their peers. I think all of that is completely fair pushback. I just really do have issues with these algorithms that really take advantage of under 16-year-olds. And frankly, the algorithms, they take advantage of all of us, but it's like, are you that well equipped to deal with it at that age? And I'm just not sure. But look, I mean, we have a vibrant democracy, and I'm glad that people over here like Leo can actually chime in and give their opinion, especially kids who are affected. And that's also sort of my point more broadly with regards to this law. Like here in Australia, we have a very vibrant democracy. Most people in this country vote in elections. And if the government implements this ban in a way that is just blatantly unpopular and not something that people are happy with, I think they will face electoral consequences. And if they do something unpopular enough, then they should face electoral consequences. Maybe it makes me naive, but it does make me hope at least that they will try and implement this law in such a way that it can at least please a majority of people, and it can have some amount of like democratic buy-in, people actually being okay with the way the law is implemented. I also think in the interest of fairness, I should show you this article by Crikey that says 1 in 3 parents will help kids get around teen social media ban, government privately warned. So this was like a research group that did polling for the government to tell them what the public's kind of response to this law would be. And they found that 1 in 3 parents, will basically assist their teenage child to like get on social media despite the ban. So I don't know like exactly what to do with this. I mean, I don't know. Do we let too many millennials have kids or something? Like that is a joke. Millennials probably don't have as much kids as they would want to because many of them cannot afford a house. But I digress. I guess when I look at this, I go, okay, well, that's why, if anything, I hope that the law is kind of more symbolic than it is harshly enforced. Because if a parent is okay with their kid being on social media, and more specifically, if they're able to be involved in at least some of their social media activity, I'm not saying they have to look at everything their kid looks at, but you got to be monitoring it and you got to be having conversations about the kind of stuff that these kids see online so that they know how to like process what they see. Because what if a kid does see a beheading video or a close-up video of the Charlie Kirk assassination, which I recently had to see against my will, but again, hey, that's social media moderation for you in 2025. Like if a kid sees that, I just hope that ultimately they have parents or older people in their lives that they can talk to and try to process seeing some of the crazy shit that's out there. And so, yeah, I don't know. Does this make the law kind of pointless? I'm not sure. Again, I kind of am in favor of the idea of under 16s not being subject to like this algorithmic manipulation, but I don't know. I can't really say for sure. To me, I think it really, really depends on how they implement this ban. And because, of course, there's lots of money involved when it comes to the business of social media, you can see that tech giants are trying to get around the teen social media ban, but the government has a trump card. So this article really just outlines headlines that these social media companies are trying to kind of skirt the ban and get around it and not be subject to it. The Albanese government seems to be basically saying, no, we're going to force you to comply, which, again, as long as they're punishing the social media companies and not social media users, then I'm kind of okay with it. Like, these are already multinational corporations that have absolutely taken advantage of our citizens for profit. That is just what they've done for the last 20 years. And so, yeah, I think if we, slap them around a little bit and give them fines for doing things that we think is harming our country, I'm personally okay with that. But yeah, I mean, of course, the social media companies are going to try and avoid the ban. Kids are going to try and get around the ban. And there's going to be a lot of people that sort of try to defy what's going on. But I still kind of think that maybe it's worth a try. I don't know. I say this purely from the perspective of someone who wants 13, 14, 15-year-olds to have like a happy, well-adjusted upbringing and social environment. If this social media ban totally backfires and it fucks up that age group even more, then I'll come out and I'll say it was a failed idea. Let's repeal it and let's try something different. But I hope, my optimistic, maybe naively optimistic hope for this law is that if they can implement it in a way that doesn't crack down on privacy, right? No ID requirements, and also doesn't punish anyone who is trying to evade the ban or get around it, and only sticks to punishing social media companies for allowing people to get on their website under 16, then I think it could be okay. I don't know. Like, I don't really know what the implementation of this ban will look like, and I don't think anyone does until it actually goes into effect. I mean, the social media companies say that they're going to be rolling out like algorithms to detect if a user is under 16, and that seems to be primarily how they will keep under 16s off the platform. Neither the government nor the social media companies have said that their approach is going to be requiring IDs from adults. I mean, we looked at the UK policy. That is literally on their website. They admit IDs and stuff will be required. So we don't have any kind of signaling like that from the Australian government. If it turns out to be that they hid that from us and there will be an ID requirement, I will be the first to say that that sucks, and I will protest that and call it shitty. But until then, I can't claim that that's what they're going to do because I don't know, and it doesn't really look like that. I'm crossing my fingers and hoping Anthony Albanese, our Prime Minister, is smart enough to know that with our vibrant democracy and with the high voting rate that we have, if he fucks up on this, people can and will vote him out. He's got to keep us happy because we're your boss, bro. So yes, that's my breakdown, my analysis of this social media law. I am hoping for the best. I guess we'll just have to see what happens. I know that's not a super juicy answer because sometimes you want to have a definitive, like, this law's going to suck or this law's going to be great. I just can't say that for sure one way or the other right now. I feel like I can give you the parts that I agree with and tell you the skepticism I have and where I hope that the law gets done right and doesn't sort of devolve into this like privacy nightmare. But until then, we will just have to see. And if there's any significant updates, I'll do another video and talk about what the implementation actually is like. Will they fuck it up? Will it save the country? Will it be somewhere in the middle, which is probably what it will be? I don't know. But I guess we will see together, and together as a democratic society, we can all decide whether or not we want to protest and tell the government that this sucks, or whether we want to approve and say, okay, you've actually done this in a reasonable way and you are literally reducing harm for certain age groups. Again, not to be naively optimistic, but of course, I hope it goes the better way and not the worse one. But whatever happens, I will cover it for you and tell you exactly what I think because I am constitutionally incapable of doing anything but that. Okay, that's pretty much all I got on that one. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed what you watched today and made it all the way to the end, go ahead and like and subscribe. I'll be back soon for some more content and we can have fun with it. So yeah, stick around, come back. I'll see you next time. Cheers. Bye.